Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Welcome to the Steve Jones Show here on News Radio 1070 WKOK, sponsored by Sunbury Motors Company, Sunbury Motors and Sunbury Motors Ford in Sunbury, sunburymotors.com, Sunbury Motors Kia in Hummel's Wharf. So, Mike DeCourcy will join us at 1:35 today, talk a little Big Ten college and overall college basketball. Tomorrow, the Iowa women's basketball play-by-play joins us to talk a little Caitlin Clark. I guess the big thing in our local sports is district basketball and district wrestling has kicked off. Last night, Shikellamy girls beat Hollidaysburg behind a career high from Luli Fatul, and what turns out to be Lou Delagrati's final home game as the Shikellamy girls coach. They will take on Hollidaysburg at 5 p.m. Saturday out at Mount Aloysius College right outside of Altoona for the District 6 championship. On the boys' side, the Shikellamy boys head out to Hollidaysburg for their 5A semifinal tonight. I do believe Kevin and the Chief are going out for that one. That one tips at 7, I believe, so they'll be on air at 6:45.
Yeah, Chief's the navigator.
Well, thank heavens for I-99.
Chief's the navigator.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be.
Because at 8, I'll never forget a guy I knew, went to college with. And he wanted to go to Hartford. And I was in Hartford at the time. And he finally gets there. He's late. I said, how's the trip? He goes, God, it was long. It took 8 hours. I said, 8 hours? I said, from Scranton? He says, you got to be kidding me. I said, it should have taken you, like 4.5. Right? He goes, I said, how'd you go? He said, well, I took 81 all the way up to the New York Thruway, and then I came down the New York Thruway to the Mass Pike. And I said, Sam, why'd you go that way? I said, all you had to do is go up 81, get on 84, and it goes right into Hartford. He says, all right, I missed the exit. He said, you could. I said, you can turn around, you know.
Oof. That is a circular route. I hope the bus to Worcester for Bucknell doesn't go that way.
Yeah, no, I hope so, too.
John thought it was a long trip before that.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, I was like, oh, really? That just screams suit. He knows how to get to Jersey Shore because that's where the people are waiting for him to turn him around and send him back. They're not big fans of his. All the disparaging things he said over the years. Meanwhile, Dave's up like, hey, everything's good, everything's great. You know. Mike DeCourcy, by the way, 1:35 today. And then Rob Brooks tomorrow, the voice of Iowa women's basketball, at 1:35. I wonder what we're going to talk about with him.
Megan Gustafson.
Oh, yeah.
I was trying to think of a previous Iowa player.
Yeah, I think she is the single game, or else she had her single game record broken.
Yes.
Scoring record.
I think that was why her name was in my head. I think I saw that in that context of Caitlin Clark.
Yeah. So, and yeah, that's great. Good job. She goes back a ways. She goes back a ways. So tonight's Rec Hall. I was asked in class today about how excited I was. And I said, I've done like 250 games basketball in Rec Hall, plus between women's gymnastics, men's gymnastics, women's volleyball, men's volleyball, wrestling, and women's basketball. I said I've probably done another 150 events in there. I said I've done like 400. So I said, so no. See, that you do get to a point where, at least for me, I love the job. Love broadcasting games. In fact, I enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed it all those years. I enjoy it more today than ever. And it's the enjoyment of doing it, and then you get to the game and the tension of it and so forth. Love it. But in terms of like the excitement, like you must be excited to go. No, it's like, okay, I don't care where the game's in the parking lot. Let's go. Let's play. See, because I always what I end up doing is like, okay, it's the game. Okay, well, it's going to go to Rec Hall. Okay, it's great, and it should be a lot of fun. But I'm like, okay, now Hawkins does this, and Goody does that, and Shannon does that, and he's strong with his left hand, not with his right hand. Great athlete, the whole deal. Guerrier, rebounder, you know. I start going through players and matchups. I don't really start thinking about where the game's going to be played and how excited I should be for it.
I'm thinking there's a different feeling, though, between Rec Hall and then, say, maybe going to the Palestra like you were earlier in the season, though.
Well, yeah, because it's here.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's here. So, yeah, I mean, that part helps. I mean, I was in there yesterday because they practiced yesterday. And they're doing shoot around right now, so that's why I couldn't be there today. But I was in there yesterday. Now, let me tell you a couple of things that struck me yesterday about it. The way they have it set up. Now, I've always talked about the end zones aren't great at Rec Hall. Well, to be honest with you, the way they have it structured, everything's going to be right on top of the court. Now, the extension that comes out on what will be to my left, which is the Atherton Street side of it, they've got to, they can't go any further with that set of stands, but then they have what we refer to as the Gucci row seats put up on the floor. That's great. But the lighting in there is just outstanding. And that's a place that over the years has struggled with lighting. Not anymore. The light, I mean, it really struck me was how great the lighting was in there yesterday. I was talking to Jeff Cook, the men's soccer coach. He came over for a little bit. Then I went back to the men's volleyball practice, and my old friend Mark Pavlik and I were talking about it, how great it is. So, yeah. I mean, the lighting really struck me. I mean, it's going to be, everybody's going to be on top of it. The students are going to be on top of the court. It is, and you've got a terrific team there. I mean, right now, Jerry Palm has Illinois as a 4 seed going into the game. And, and Mike DeCourcy, of course, we're going to have him on, talk about this and more. Everybody's on top of the court. It's a real basketball gym. I mean, it's a great wrestling facility. I mean, it's not a good wrestling facility. It's a great wrestling facility. That's why I can understand why Cale doesn't want to leave there. It's a great women's volleyball venue. Because I'll go to a wrestling match and you're right on top of everything. It's fabulous. You go to a women's volleyball match, you're right on top. It's great. And then and every other sport that's in there. But I've done maybe 400 events in there. I remember doing the men's volleyball Final Four in there a couple times. Doing the men's volleyball Final Four in there, doing women's volleyball in there, and women's gymnastics and men's gymnastics and wrestling in there, women's basketball in there to go with the men's games I've done. I've just done so many games in there, and they say, "How excited are you?" Like, well, I've been there a billion times. How excited do you want me to be? I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the matchup, but I'm also interested to see what the atmosphere is like and what it can mean tonight. Because I've done a lot of games in there where Penn State's, quote, pulled upsets. And the venue certainly played a role in it. So we'll see how it plays out tonight. Illinois is really good. Yeah, I think I talked about Coleman Hawkins yesterday, right? Because, look, Shannon's their leading scorer, 21-plus a game. We all know his off-the-court problems. He's only playing because of court injunction. That's the only reason he's playing right now, because of a court injunction. And he got the court injunction against Illinois to play because Illinois suspended him. And, Guerrier's a rebounder, seen him before at Syracuse. Danger's a good inside player. He's not playing as much because they've changed their team around. And, and Luke Goody is a three-point shooter. I think only 26 of his shots have been twos this year. Everything else has been a three. But then there's Coleman Hawkins. Last year he went to the G League Combine. And whenever I see somebody like that go to the G League Combine, my first thought is, I think they're going to come back next year. But you go to the G League Combine, like, well, why do you waste your time doing that? Because guess what? They tell you where you're going well, and they tell you what you need to improve on. That's why you go to it. And he came back to Illinois, and look, he plays well with his back to the basket. He has an excellent face-up game and a good outside shot. He is the best passing big man in the Big Ten, bar none. All right? Defensively, he's improved. But this is a big team, Todd. They are big. They are 6'6" or taller at all five starting positions.
That explains why they go to the glass so hard.
Right? No, and they get a lot of rebounds. That's part of the game. That's part of what they do. And that's, I give them a lot of credit for how they played this year. They've been a smarter team this year, and I think the mask has something to do with that. But they're a smarter team this year than last year. I did not really feel they were a smart, cohesive team last year, despite being very, very talented. So, all right, we'll come back, take a break. More in a moment here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. All right, great to have you with us on the show today. All right, Mike DeCourcy's coming up. And Dick Girardi is driving up to the game today with Dave Jones. This will be, from what we can figure out, is going to be the last time Dave will travel up to see a Penn State basketball game in his writing career. Wow. Is Dave at times a polarizing figure? Yeah. But I've known Dave for a long, long time. Okay? Dave and I get along great. All right? I consider Dave a friend. All right? Hopefully he considers me one as well. Now, do I agree with everything Dave writes? Nope. Does Dave agree with everything I say? Nope. So what? We both love sports. both love basketball, and there are times we have different opinions. That's fine. When you are doing columns, and I've always tried to give this perspective on columns, but it's worth repeating. And I'm going to talk to Dave about coming on the show to reflect on his career, because I think you'll find it interesting. When you write a column, to me, one of the more important elements of a good column is does it get you to think? And when you're done thinking about it, you may disagree with everything in the column and be mad about it. Or you might agree with almost everything in there and you see the perspective. Or you might not agree with it, but you see where he's coming from. Either way, in all three scenarios, what did you do? You were thinking. It provokes thought. And you don't deliberately write something with the idea that I'm going to be contrarian here because I want to get the populace riled up. No, you just write your opinion as to what you think. First, let's start with this. As a pure writer, the ability to turn a phrase, right, prose, whatever. He's a great writer. Not a good writer. He's legitimately a great writer. And a lot of people don't agree with what he writes or what his opinion happens to be. That's fine. That's all okay, because his job is to provoke thought. Okay? It's to provoke thought when you write a column. And you don't have to agree with everybody's thoughts. Right? Just go to one of our staff meetings. All right. What? No? Bad example. I think. Oh, geez. There we go. Right? But that's what the job of a good columnist is, to provoke thought, get you to think, get you to consider what's going on, using their background, their experience to craft thought, idea, whatever it may be. You don't have to accept it. That's fine. That's your prerogative as the reader. Or, in the case of a talk show, as a listener. That's your prerogative. But I just wanted to point that out, that he was coming up here. He has passionately covered basketball for decades. He has passionately covered Penn State basketball for decades. You may not have liked everything he wrote about it or thought about it, but again, that's your prerogative as the reader, and that's his prerogative as the columnist. I just wanted to point that out because I know that it's going to be the last time up here. So,
I was going to say, as somebody of my age, the two people I originally think of Penn State coverage, especially around here, are Dave and Ronnie Christ at the Harrisburg paper.
Yes, and Dave thought the world of Ronnie Christ. Thought the world. You should have seen at Michigan State when it was going to be Ronnie's last regular season game. There was a tribute done to him up in, I think it was Bud Tallman at the time. Bud Tallman? Was it Bud Tallman? May have been. You should have seen how emotional Dave got in talking about Ronnie Christ. It was so touching. But at some point between now and the time he actually retires, I'm going to talk to him tonight about what day to get him on the show, just to talk.
This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory with great warranties. Fabulous pre-owned inventory, which they go over every vehicle and give the Sunbury Motors guarantee to. And a terrific service department. Whether it's routine or difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. He is, without question, in my opinion, one of the best in the business and has been in that category for decades. My old friend Mike DeCourcy. Mike, it is always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time today.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Doing really great. Doing great. Going back to, how many times have you ever been to Rec Hall? Were you ever, back in the days you were covering Penn State?
I know for a fact that I was there to cover Pitt versus Penn State in the 1992 NIT.
Yep, Pitt won that game.
I believe I covered a West Virginia game up there.
Yeah.
For at least once. And I think I might have been there for wrestling, but I'm not sure about that one. That was a little fuzzy.
Right. All right, so UConn goes out and takes apart Marquette on Saturday. Everybody is proclaiming, oh, my goodness, they can't be stopped. Then the next game they go to Omaha, and Creighton takes them apart and shot the lights out against them. Does that in any way indicate to us how difficult it is to win 6 consecutive games in March?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. But it also indicates how overwhelming, especially in this season, the home court advantage can be.
Yeah.
It seems to really make a difference in teams this year more than ever. I was when the NCAA Men's Basketball Selection Committee announced their bracket, their mock bracket, I guess you'd call it, bracket projection, whatever you want to call it, on Saturday, with the top 4 seeds in each region. I had 14 of the 16, and I was off by 1 spot on the 15th. I had basically Wisconsin as the first 5 instead of the last 4. But I was off by 2 lines on San Diego State, because what San Diego State has done is beat all the good teams in the Mountain West that are all pretty good at home. And they go on the road and they lose. And it happened again last night. There has been, against the better teams in that league, there has been almost no interruption to that pattern with San Diego State, and yet they still put them as a pretty solid 4 seed, which really surprised me, because that's who they are. And I know there are a lot of teams on that list. I'll be honest. I know there are a lot of teams on that list that fit that description. Iowa State's kind of a little bit like that. Baylor's kind of a little bit like that. But they're like that in a better league.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Mountain West is a very fine league, but it's not the Big Ten or the Big 12 or the Big East or the SEC.
It's interesting because I think I saw something that in the last 4 years, ranked teams on the road won 68% of the time. I think that was it. But this year, the winning percentage for ranked teams is 44% on the road, which I found to be fascinating, but also matches up with what I've watched. Does that match up with what you've watched?
Absolutely. That's everything that we've seen this year. And what that says is, first of all, the lesser teams are not as lesser as they used to be, for lack of a better piece of grammar, and the better teams are not the powers that they used to be. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is a bit of homogenization because of the transfer portal has stretched the talent out to more places. And also, I think this is not a very impressive freshman class generally. Mm-hmm. It lacks greatness. And secondarily, it's harder now for a freshman to make an impact. It will be at least through next season, because of the COVID year, where you literally have 18-year-olds playing against 25-year-olds. So it's always been hard to make the transition from playing high school ball to playing college. But that leap is much greater now and has been for the last 3-4 years than it's ever been, and probably ever will, hopefully ever will be again.
Not everybody can make the transition up. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, like, I see that all the time. Like, guys make the transition up, and you think they can, but then they can't. But then there's Dalton Connect. I want to say Northern Colorado. Goes to Tennessee, and he has been terrific there, where the point where he's going to be an NBA pick, it looks like. When you watch him play, what has allowed him to make that transition from a Big Sky situation to an SEC situation.
Yeah, it's really wild because, like, if he had been the best player in the Big Sky, I don't think any of us would be super surprised that he's an all-league level player or maybe even an all-America level player. Just get granted a better stage and better teammates, and that can empower him to play better against better competition. That wouldn't have been surprising. I mean, he had a fine year last year, but he was second-team all-league. He averaged 20-some points, but it didn't really move the needle on their team. And that's what the surprising part is. Northern Colorado was not very good last year, even with him. And we're saying the same thing in the Big Ten with Lance Jones at Purdue and Marcus Damas at Illinois. You'll see tonight Marcus Damas is terrific. He and Lance Jones were teammates at Southern Illinois last year, and they weren't very good.
I know, that's
players,
crazy. It's crazy. That's crazy.
It's nuts.
You talked about freshman classes. All right, so I want to go to a freshman class from a couple of years ago, and that would be Ohio State. When Malachi Branham came in, I think a lot of us thought he'd be really good, but I didn't really think of him initially as a one-and-done guy, which he ended up being. In the end, how much does that affect a coach like Chris Holtmann, who's thinking maybe he's going to get a couple of years out of him and only gets one?
Yeah, I wrote about this last week, and he had two such players. He had one the next year as well.
Yeah.
The reality is that it ends almost everyone's career, or not everyone's career, everyone's tenure. Some of them go on and coach elsewhere, but it ends almost. Rick Barnes is a great example. We just talked about Dalton Connect.
Yep.
I mean, he was at Texas for basically, I think, 15 years before he had Corey Joseph go pro on him. Then he had a couple more, and by 2015, he didn't have the Texas job anymore. And he didn't get any worse as a coach, but it just totally disrupted. When you signed Kevin Durant, he knew like the minute that Kevin finished the script on the T on the letter of intent that Kevin was going to be there for one season, and so he could recruit knowing that, and he could sell the next small forward that he wanted. Don't worry about Kevin, he's not going to be in your way, and watch what he does because we're going to do that with you or some approximation thereof. And so he could do that. But when you sign Corey Joseph and he comes out and he averages, I don't know, maybe a dozen points a game on a team that lost, I think, its second-round NCAA tournament game, that just wrecks you. And we've seen it happen with legitimately terrific coaches who had made Final Fours, like Ben Howland at UCLA, happened with Zach Levine. They did not recover from that. You look at Tom Crean. It happened at Indiana with Noah Vonleh. Did not recover from that. And there are other elements to all of these issues. But that one thing in common, it's like almost insurmountable. And the only ones who have surmounted it are guys who either had already had national championships or were in the Hall of Fame, usually both. Jim Boeheim managed it to an extent, although I think the program was diminished. Obviously, Mike Krzyzewski could get over that, and he did. And of course, John Calipari. They had it happen to them in 2013, and 2014 and 15 they made the Final Four. So there are places where people that can survive it, but generally it's impossible. And my friend Mike Hopkins out at Washington. Really good guy, and I think it started out great, but then he signed two guys that fit this description, and the program has not recovered. And I hope the best for him, but the program has never recovered from signing Isaiah Stewart. The guys who played for him, they had okay years, but it's too much. If you can't replace them quickly enough, you never recover.
John Calipari's in that interesting spot at Kentucky. He's got a lot of young talent on that team, but they have been a mixed bag of winning, and they even lost, I think, 3 straight games in Rupp Arena, which, as you and I know, is totally unacceptable down there.
Right.
So where is that program right now, in your opinion? Because it's still really terrific, but
The butt is the extra. The question,
yes.
Okay.
My apologies.
Well,
poorly phrased.
No, it's fine. I was waiting. I just didn't want to step on you there.
Yeah.
There are people who are dissatisfied, Steve, and I don't have any patience for that at all. I really don't. It's the same as my lack of patience for Steelers fans who want to move on from Mike Tomlin.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not how. I just don't believe that's how sports works. Like if you have a great coach, and some of the results don't meet up to his standards or the program standards, does that mean he's still not a great coach? Do I think that John Calipari got dumb in the last 3 years or 4 years? No, I don't. Do I think that they're still bringing in really good players? They are. It's a difficult space to navigate. If you get the right guys now, you still can have great success, but it's not as easy to figure out where to get them, and it may not be as sustainable as it once was. I think we're going to see more ebbs and flows in college sports, especially college basketball, because it's so easy with 300-some schools. It's so easy to go from being the seventh guy on a good team or a great team and go be the first guy on a mid-major team where you get to play all the time and score a lot of points, maybe make the tournament. So it's harder to sustain greatness than it used to be.
Yeah. Purdue is a team, we know what their NCAA tournament has looked like under Matt Painter. You look at this team here, and I know it's going to depend on bracket, matchups, I understand all of that. How much pressure is on them to actually get to the Final Four because of not just this team but history?
Oh, there's a lot. I wonder, because of what the recent history is, I wonder if the greatest pressure isn't just to get to the Sweet 16. Because not very many of the guys who are on the 2022 team are on this team. I think there are a few, Mason Gillis, one or two others. Right. But they don't have great experience at any level of the tournament. And I don't think Zach Edey came back to have guys hang on him for 30 games to lose short of the Final Four. Mm-hmm. But, Sunday's experience showed us again that if they want to get to where they want to go, they've got to have some guys make some jump shots.
No doubt.
It didn't happen on Sunday. There have been other circumstances when it didn't happen. The worst part of it is, I think, that you have guys that won't take them. And that's where the real problem starts to crop up for Purdue, is guys kind of running away from shots or declining open shots. They just can't have that. That team needs space. If they have space, Edey becomes almost unguardable. But if they have no space because guys either don't shoot open shots or can't seem to connect on open shots even though their numbers say they should make most of them or nearly half, I guess I should say, that's when they will run into a problem. And I saw that on Sunday. Ethan Morton, wide open shot, with Edey being triple teamed, wide open, top of the key. It's just the kind of shot just about every college guard should be able to make. And he passed it up. And if you're out there for defense and you're passing up that shot, man, you better be like Michael Cooper circa 1986.
Yeah.
Because, nobody's that good defensively that they can deaden the offense by passing up a shot like that.
See, in this, you brought up Lance Jones. See, to me, in watching them not just on TV but watching them in person, I feel like his athleticism is that different little element that they haven't had with the team, and that's why I'm anxious to see what he does to open up the floor for Edey and others.
Yeah, he's been great, especially post-Christmas as we restarted the Big Ten season. His numbers are phenomenal. He's had one bad game. He's shooting close to 40% on threes. You look at his season number, and it's not overwhelming, but as the competition has gotten better but more so as he's gotten more comfortable, he's shooting high 30s, 38, 39, and that they can win with that, but they can't just have him doing that. They need others to do that as well. and that Braden Smith has been a tremendous point guard.
Yes.
But you can't ask him to make shots every game because teams are going to guard him harder. The guys who are wings and stretch four like Mason is, those guys got to make shots when teams are jamming the lane, and they did not do that on Sunday.
Right. And see, with Smith, if Smith goes right, his passing is tremendous. But if he goes left, see, that's where you got to turn him. Then it's
right.
Good but not great. One last question. That's going to be about Houston. Kelvin and his staff have there's a change in conference. It's a whole new set of opponents on a night in and night out basis. Shed, the point guard, is really one of those coaches on the floor kind of point guards, in my opinion. I don't know if you have a different opinion.
Oh, I love him.
And what kind of job have they done considering the change to the Big 12?
Yeah, I think it's been great. They defend so well. They are so, and it's not just a change to the Big 12, but also the player personnel losses that they had after last year.
Right. Yeah.
They lost Jarris Walker to the NBA draft. A guy, one of those guys that they knew was going to be a one-year guy, so it doesn't hurt you when you know that. But they still had to replace him, and they don't have super dynamic wing scoring or post scoring, and I think that's where their issue will develop at some point in the tournament. And for me, when you're a team like them, your whole deal is to try to delay the discovery of your flaw until as late as possible.
Yep.
And that may be in the Final Four, it may be in the championship game, and maybe by some miracle nobody ever figures it out. But they're right now their number one and number two options basically are small guards. Shed is around 6'1", L.J. Cryer's around 6'1". That's not a recipe for winning at all, but no one can say you can't get to the Final Four playing like that.
Yeah, because that's what I was talking to somebody about yesterday, and they asked about Illinois, and I said, look, they've got something that's interesting. This is a conference where you need big scoring wings. I mean, this conference, you really have to have that. Like Seth Lundy was like that last year. Said Illinois has got that. You need in this conference big, scoring wings, like 6'5" to 6'8" scoring wings. I mean, that's how I've viewed the Big Ten.
Yeah, they fit the description of Houston in a totally different way.
You're right.
Their flaw is they don't have a true point guard, and you're not winning the NCAA championship without that. But
totally
you can get to Arizona. You can have a lot of fun along the way, and you can hang a banner at the end. So you're not going to win the national championship like that. And I can say that. Now they can tell me I'm wrong, and then they can go out and do it. But history says I'm right because no one has done that. I mean, usually you do it with somebody who's extraordinary at that position, either NBA talent-wise or like Joel Berry, for instance, a college 4-year guy who is indispensable. But it's usually one or the other. I did this article a few years ago on the Jimmy Black exception. On the very few teams in recent history. So Jimmy Black goes all the way back to 1982, so we're talking 40 years now. There were only a handful of teams over those 40 years that didn't have a legit star in one way or another at the point guard position. But there were a few, and that's what I call the Jimmy Black exception. But even Jimmy was a point guard. I don't think that Illinois can claim the Jimmy Black exception. They have somebody that nominally plays the position, but they don't have somebody that's a true point guard.
Mike, you have no idea how much I enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it very much, and look forward to talking again soon.
All right, you bet, Steve. Thank you.
Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News, Big Ten Network. Yeah, that's a lot of great points to unpack there in talking college basketball with him at the highest level. And that is a big issue with Illinois. The ability that they don't have that true point guard. That's what Penn State – talk about what Mike talked about. Okay, what did we talk about yesterday that one of the things you have to do as a coach, not only accentuate what you do well, but you have to mask what you don't do well. I've talked about that how many times on this show. But one of the keys to coaching is you have to mask either a mediocre matchup or something you don't do well. And that he's talking about Houston. They're masking certain things they don't do well. Okay. There aren't many things they don't do well, but there are certainly a couple that, and they have to mask it. Well, for Illinois, that's what they have to do with their point guard situation because they don't have one. Boy, I wish we had a point guard in the staff meetings. No? Bad comparison.
I was going to say maybe you could fill that role.
No. Steve is very busy. Steve votes no.
Steve's
right.
more of a two-guard.
Steve is more at the moment when it comes to this operation, lone wolf. All right, we'll come back with more in a moment here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. A former NFL scout evaluated Caleb Williams. And mercy me, by the time it's done, he's lucky he gets picked higher than Brock Purdy. This was really an amazing evaluation, which I'm going to give to you in the next half hour, where you sit back and go, okay, really? Now, not everybody in the league feels this way, but it was a really interesting piece. And you know what? I was listening to Dave Pasch being interviewed on Sirius XM. I think it may have been today. And they were asking him about Caleb Williams and Drake May. And he said what's interesting is that they did 4 North Carolina games this year. And they sat down and talked with Drake May every time. They said USC would not let them talk to Caleb Williams at all. Like, wow. And I thought that was really interesting.